Good evening. It is I, Carrie V. Dean, coming to you with another episode of A Dullard Speaks. Well, I had started an episode last night, but was interrupted. The lady that I caretake, I pay someone from time to time to come in and relieve me one or two nights, so I can at least spend one or two nights in my apartment and do things like this podcast that I'm trying to develop. I don't know if I really should call it a podcast, but more or less my video blog, if you will, or personal opinion on the world events as they are. And the lady that I occasionally have come last night had an issue, and a very scary moment happened to her, and had to leave abruptly, so I needed to get over there and retake charge of the dear lady that I caretake. And I had the life scared out of me because the way she approached, I was thinking, oh no. And then when she told me what was going on, then my heart really felt for her, because that's the hard thing about caretaking someone with dementia is you have to make sure you keep yourself in some form of stable health. Can't exactly say good health, because I'm not in good health myself. Have problems with high blood pressure. One of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast is to help regulate my blood pressure and keep it low. Because I've been putting up with things for years and holding things in and not dealing with them, not wanting to be confrontational, not wanting to be labeled that person, and trying to stay within the norms of what society wanted to pinhole me in. And since my total separation from the man that was in my life, and I reclaim my self-worth, I'm not willing to put up with those kind of things anymore. And oh yeah, for a while I got sent to therapy and everything else, but sitting in therapy was only making my blood pressure go through the roof. First thing they started doing is trying to treat me like I was a dementia patient. What were the three key things we just said when I talked to you at the top of the hour? I don't care, because it wasn't important. So I didn't even pay attention. They didn't like that response. I'm sorry. You know, come on. Please. No wonder people just totally go brain dead. When you constantly have to deal with dumb shit, you go brain dead. And from some of the stuff that I read online and comments on the news articles and stuff that are coming out, I have to laugh. Um, Seems to be a lot of brain dead people in the world right now, um, having to deal with just stupid, dumb shit. That's one thing we all have in common. Um, that thing that happened between the Proud Boys and the anti-fascist group, the people pulling guns and stuff. Come on, that's dumb shit. I can respect you have your own opinion, whether you respect mine or not. As far as my podcasts go, I have two. As far as they go, I can respect what other people have to say that's negative or whatever else, and want to attack me, want to attack my IQ, want to attack, my very existence in the world. Hey, those are your mental issues you need to go deal with. As far as me, I've dealt with my demons, and that's why I do the podcast. It's because it helps me see the demon within me. And I don't try to keep it neutral. I don't try to go one side or the other because, one, I stopped believing in the Democrats a long time ago. Um, in 2016, voted fully Republican and found out the Republicans don't know how to govern. They talk a good game, but when you put them in positions of power, it's like finance 101 just slips out of their head because they only look at the finance from one angle. What can I gain? Not what's best for America. And that's what we're kind of seeing in Congress right now is we got a bunch of politicians in there, both Democratic and Republican, that are only looking at optics from their perspective of what can they gain, what can they get out of it in their pockets. Because to them, the taxpayer dollars are supposed to go to their salaries. That's it. Whatever else they do with the taxpayer dollars that go into the federal government, well, that's for Congress to decide. Well, Trump came in and said, well, no, the buck stopped with me. Oh, no, the buck doesn't really stop with me, but I have control of the buck. If that didn't scare the people that are supporting him, nothing will. Anytime a guy that's calling himself this financial genius and a genius businessman and successful this, that, and the other, and goes into a place of power where he's in charge of finances or has taken control of finances, then says, well, no, Congress is supposed to control it, but they're not controlling it, so I took it over. But it's Congress's fault because they weren't doing their jobs. I have a problem with that person. I have a problem right now with that person because that means the next decision you make and screws over my finances, guess what? Oh yeah, that's right. You're going to blame the previous administration because you're trying to clean up the corruption of the previous administration. Well, you can't be a bully through optics and illusions that you're this big tough guy, and then turn around and not take responsibility for leadership. But that's exactly what we have in office right now. A man that has never taken responsibility for anything that he's done that's caused adverse hardships on any of the people that have worked underneath him. This man has not taken responsibility for anything that goes on in this life. And I must say, I applaud him. I applaud him. The reason why I applaud him is because he's deluded himself into his own internal hell of always wanting to be liked and never gaining it. You know, all the people that are following him, they're following him because he's a bully. If he wasn't a bully, they wouldn't be following him. And that's what's happening right now, as more and more people are becoming disillusioned with him, because they're seeing that all he did was disillusion their behinds into giving up a lot of their rights and destroying their finances. Yes. How do you control a group of people? You're seeing it. We're living it right now. You're seeing how Hitler destroyed Germany. He started with the slow attacks from the moral angle. Oh yes, the very basics. The scriptures. Let's use the scriptures, and he did. And he wrote Mein Kampf, which was to replace the Bible. Yes, they were burning Bibles in Germany. They burned the Bibles to take over Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf was going to be the new Bible of all Germans. Which stripped everyone of their humanity, and dignity as a human. Unless they looked white. Oh, well, no, he didn't stop there. You couldn't just look white. You had to kiss the ring, baby. You had to bend the knee. That's right. If you refused to bend the knee, you were a Jew. Whether you were pure German or not, you were a Jew. But when you think about the world from the Bible's perspective and how the Jews wandered far and wide and scattered all over, how many of us can say we don't have some Jewish background in us? there you have it. So, basically, when you strip away all the layers of what Hitler did, is he just convinced people, if you don't think the way I think and you don't agree with the way I think, I'll just get rid of you. Modern day Trump, there are no opposing sides, it's only me. Whoa, what's that sound like? Oh yes, Putin. Back in the 80s, where he was arresting everybody and anybody. You so much as got caught in an email chat to a friend saying, I think Putin's a pussy. Boom. Because you wrote you thought he was a pussy, you're in jail. That's right, not jail. Over there, they don't have jail. They have prison. That's it. They don't they just skip past go and put you straight to prison. um, your trial is prove you're innocent. Well, you can't prove you're innocent when there's physical evidence that you did state this or you did say this with multiple witnesses. Even if you didn't say it, it got written as such, or someone took your words out of context on purpose. It put it that way, it didn't matter. Because in that country, you got witnesses, multiple witnesses. There was a printed statement that was a direct quote from you. Whether it was or not, who cares? People said they heard you say it. That's it. Game over. Prison. And depending on how offended Putin felt, and it's still that way today. Depending on how offended the man feels, you could spend the rest of your life in prison. Just so he can say, I showed you. I I took everything from you and you're nothing. But then you cry about your country's resources and not having people to work the resources. Oh yeah. Same thing here in America. You're crying about not having qualified help and not having dignified help and this, that, and the other. But you forgot one part of the moral code in the Bible. That's how to treat your health. Yeah. You forgot how to treat your health. Um, Sorry, I just had to take a breather here because I'm a person coming from the background of always being under the eight ball, already rolled over and just pinned under the eight ball and being dragged along with the rest of the mess. And something in my core just doesn't quite, it's not quite there. And I know this, I've known this since I was about 7 years old. 5, 7 years old, I've known this. Um, they got to me early. Yeah. Um, the, I got to see some of the hardcore prejudices and stuff. I didn't understand it at the time, but when I was like 6 or 7 years old, one summer with my grandparents, and a Caucasian gentleman came calling on my grandfather. He needed something repaired or whatever, and they have their own way of speaking down south. Everybody, you know, try to talk with respect to each other. But here was this younger Caucasian guy calling my grandfather a boy. My grandmother liked to whip the snot out of me because I overheard him call my grandfather a boy, and I said, "Hey man, who you calling a boy?" And my grandmother snatched me up quick and waste no time. Of course, the younger Caucasian man just kind of laughed about it. He wasn't offended by it or anything because I was just 7 years old. What's a 7-year-old know? Um, and But after my grandmother got through, when my grandfather came back off the porch from talking to the Caucasian man, he came in and whooped my butt. Told me I was being disrespectful. Well, like I said, back then I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how was I being disrespectful when this young man, because what I was taught of respect was somebody older than you called sir, not boy. And difference of growing up in California and having to visit my grandparents in Arkansas. I said Arkansas, and got my butt whooped about that too. But anyway, yeah. So it's just okay. It's spelled Arkansas, but I gotta say Arkansas. All right, makes no sense. But hey, as people used to joke about getting cut with the whip, you get hit a few times where you don't want to feel like that unless you're gonna die. You learn to keep your mouth shut. Uh, but the one thing I refuse to let them take from me is to tell me that I couldn't do something or I was smart enough to do something. Yeah, I got held back in the second grade when my mother first got custody of me in California. They held me back in the second grade, but had me reading at a fourth or fifth grader's reader book, but saying that I read slower than the rest of the class. Well, you had me on an advanced reader, but yet you're writing that I couldn't read. My mother went and complained, and they finally had this school board come together. And one day at the school and gave all the kids a test on reading levels. Well, come to find out, hell, I should have been skipped a couple of grades because I was reading out of a fourth or fifth grader's reader, not a second grader reader. um, Guess what the book was? Just come out on the market. Little House on the Prairie. Yeah, remember that? Before the TV series, the book came out. Well, guess what? By the time I was in the sixth grade and they were using that as an advanced reader in the sixth grade, I had read most of it. So, at that time, it was only the first set of 3 books had come out. It wasn't the last 6 books that came out. Well, altogether, it became a set of 12 books as they got into the later years of Laura Ingram's life. And a lot of that was Hollywood fabrication added ons, and let's not even get into all of that. But yeah, that was an interesting thing that happened that I recall in my young formative years. Um, Next time it happened was in junior high, the 6th grade through 8th grade before going into high school. Um, they call it middle school. Well, here I was already being given college level math problems to do in an advanced math class. But get this, this each time that this has happened to me, it's been a Jewish instructor or a Spanish instructor. But on the same token, I've had Spanish instructors that actually stood up for me. So, yes, you see how complex this thing about racism is? It's not about whether or not the person's Mexican, Jewish, or whatever else. It's about the character of the person. And each time I start thinking about that, by the time I got in high school, I started really seeing it for what it was. I shouldn't dislike this group of people because of this Jewish lack of character person lumped me in the category of not being intelligent and everything else, and called me a cheater and everything else on one of my tests in his class, and got called before the assistant principal, who pulled me in his office. He handed me, just out the blue, he had college prep math questions in just regular, normal sixth grader math questions. After I finished the test, he looked at it and he said, "Well, you didn't show your work." That's what the assistant principal said. He said, "You didn't show your work," who also happened to be Jewish. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, sir," I said, once I looked at the question and I read the question and I read what the math problem was, I said, I framed out the math problem. I said I could see what the answer would be. And he said, "Yeah, but you got to show that." And I told him, I said, "Well, I'm not one of those people that can show you how I got there. It just made common sense to me to go with this answer." And my mother got called in and everything else, and he explained to my mom that I had the ability to do college level work. So by the time I got in high school, I was already doing college level work. So when they put me back down into regular algebra classes and stuff, I couldn't make heads and sense of that crap. It was just stupid to me. But I did a little better in calculus, and I did a little better in trig. Go figure. Someone said, "Well, there's no way you did good in calculus if you couldn't do algebra." Well, obviously I did, because I was in the top 15th percentile of who's who in America's listing of graduating high schoolers for the class of 1983. The reason why I was in the top 15% instead of the top 10% is because that was also during the time of the Asian influx. Yes, Asians had landed in California. Big time. They were taking over neighborhoods and everything else. Um, so instead of being a competitor for valedictorian, I was put down to salutatorian, not only in my middle school graduating up to high school, but during my high school graduation. Happened again. A friend of mine who should have been valedictorian got knocked out the race because they let a person of age and persuasion have the honor of valedictorian. So that knocked her down to salutatorian, and so she and I both co-chaired being salutatorians, and were each able to give a speech during our high school graduation. I was an honorable mention salutatorian, so that's what they said, but not given the actual title of salutatorian. That's how I got knocked into the 15 percentile instead of the 10 percentile of top students. Yeah. Politics at work, folks. Politics at work, even back then, even, just taking note. And like I said, as I progressed and progressed and got older, each time I'd look back. I would look back and reflect. And I started to realize you're never going to change anyone's opinion of who they think you are or what they think you should be. You just got to believe in yourself and do what you need to do. And that pretty much got me through several difficult job interviews and everything else to gain some pretty neat positions within companies. But I went in knowing that I'd never get hired permanently into any of these companies. Yeah, think about that. Poor kids are taught you will never fit in, you will never belong. Sitting in the same classrooms with the successful kids that are being taught, oh, you can be anything you want to be in the world. How do you do that? English 1A, totally theoretical class, meaning it's a class in theory, which is supposed to help shape your way of thinking. I had an instructor that didn't like my analysis of a theoretical situation he had put out there for us to each evaluate and how we would take certain actions. Well, when it came my turn to say what I would do, and I said what I would do, which resulted almost the same as most of the other students who said what they would do, which was basically go the empathetic route rather than the apathetic route to help the person. He looked at me and said that, oh no, well, you're coming at it all wrong. That's not the correct way to come at that question. So I looked at him. I raised my hand. He kept trying to ignore me, so I finally just shouted out, "Excuse me, sir. I need you to explain to me how you can tell me my opinion is irrelevant." And I said, "We're sitting in a class of theory, which elicits opinions to come up to a compromise of a viable solution to the problem. So therefore, how can my opinion be irrelevant?" He looked at me like I had just done something awful, like key his car or something. And see, that's the kind of attitude that'll get you an F in this class, is what he said back to me. Okay, so now you're gonna not only threaten me, but you let me know you're gonna give me an F for the class because I refuse or I question your dictatorial style of telling me that my opinion was irrelevant. Oh, he threw me out of the class. And I was going to have to repeat the class and this, that, and the other, and another. You know what I did? I said, screw this. I don't need this. I'm wasting my money and my time doing this because I was paying off for my student loans while I was in school because I was already working in the real world to get into school. So I wouldn't have to take as many student loans. I walked right out the door. I called my student representative. I told him what had happened. Turns out that instructor was dean over the English department, so I wasn't going to get any recourse against him, being a long-standing staff member of the college. And so therefore, yeah, I said, you know what? Going back to my technology roots. And I left there, put myself through some Computerland style courses and stuff, got certified as a computer tech, and never looked back after that. Worked in technology from 1983, 82. What was it? 82 from 1983, 84. This is after I got into college, was out of high school, so it had to be 1983, 84. 1983, 84. Worked in technology ever since, and while putting myself through school and learning the basics of technology and the whole 9 yards, and all about Murphy's Law and all this other good, fortunate, goody stuff. And right after I graduated and, you know, was already working, like I said, I was a working student, putting myself through school. and went, uh-oh, here's the next hurdle. Sally Mae. And I went, okay, Sally Mae, okay, so I owe the money back, okay, start making payments to Sally Mae, paying them, paid late one time, paid late one time, paid late, didn't miss a payment, just paid late. I forgot, and it was 2 days before I was going to get my next check, and went, oh, I got to go make the payment. Got my check, went and made the payment. The person that collected my payment at the bank never mentioned to me that, oh, we've already put you through the collections. You got to send this to collections now for Sally Mae to get it. Never mentioned that. Continued on making all my payments through the bank. Well, the Bank of the West, went out of business. Had not notified anyone that they were going out of business. How I found out is I went by in person one day. I happened to be in the neighborhood, and instead of mailing my check into them, I actually put the check in their deposit slot. Well, guess what? Walked up to the door. After I put the check into their deposit slot, walked up to the door, and because I had a question about why I hadn't gotten a statement back from them in 2 or 3 months of my payments I'd been making. And there's a big notice on the door saying, well, 6 months prior, they had gone out of business. So I had sent over, at this time, $3,000 worth of checks to that bank location towards the student loan I had at the time. That was only $10,000. Oh, never heard a word. I immediately called Sally Mae, contact Sally Mae, and said, "Hey, what's going on? This bank that you had me go to get to pay for the student loan and all this stuff." Sally Mae, oh no, yeah, we don't associate with that bank anymore. Well, when you're going to tell me, oh, well, your name's been in collections for months, so instead of paying back on $10,000, they told me I was now paying back on $40,000. I went, what? This is crazy. So, spent 4.5 months being bounced around all through Sally Mae's legal department and blah, 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 blah. I finally went to the consumer credit department and got that paid off. So I thought. Got a letter and everything saying it had been paid off. Done with. Done deal. Got a letter from Sally Mae saying that it was a done deal. That was paid off. Well, next time I went to go enroll in school, 3 weeks after I signed for my Pell Grant loans to get to this school work, that was only supposed to spend $2,100. Found out, no, they added another zero behind it. It was $21,000 because it's supposed to be the equivalent of going through a 2-year college course. At the time, they didn't have a computer science degree, so the courses I was going through, they were just in the development of creating the computer science degrees. And making them valid or to be validated through accredited colleges. And so the little school I was going to said, well, we can get you the equivalent to that degree through our getting a diploma through our school, which is accredited to do that. Said okay, so signed up for their little 21,000 course. You see where I went wrong? When I saw that they changed the 2,100 to 21,000, I should have stopped there. Oh no. Got back in bed with Sally Mae again. Well, 3 weeks after doing that, they went back in their records that they never took off. I found out later they never sent in the letter to say that I had paid them off from the previous loan, and they added the previous loan onto the new loan. Now I owed close to $70,000 back to Sally Mae. I said, what? And then it went to 80,000. 8 months after that, I said, oh man, this is getting ridiculous. And I had 5 or 6 different collection agencies saying that I was delinquent on the original loan that I had, and this loan and that loan and that loan. And I went, wait a minute. I'm paying you guys while I'm going to school directly, and you're garnishing my wages on top of that. That's what I had called them about. I said, hey, why is Sally Mae all of a sudden garnishing my wages? That's how I found out 3 weeks after I went to that they had reactivated the old loan that should have been closed off the books. Well, guess what? They knew they could get away with that because I'm an American black woman. Who's going to believe me? Everybody knows black women don't pay their bills. That's the narrative they were trying to send. But guess what? I do pay my bills. Got through all that mess. Had to use the, like I said, consumer credit people to clear all that mess up. Got all that mess cleared up. Well, next time I went to school, just to bump up to the next grade in my employment, took a little short pick-me-up course, going back through the technology courses and stuff to get certified in several different programs and everything. Well, that school turned out to be a scam setup school through Sally Mae. And over half of us that were taking those courses were minorities and veterans. And finally, in 2003, Bush Jr. was now president. So in 2003, the announcement finally came out that the military was finally suing them which didn't help us civilians that Sally Mae had already screwed over, but at least some of the veterans got their student loans cleared up. And they spent a good part of my life just dragging all the old, and after Sally Mae got dissolved, the government had paid off all the old student loan stuff and stuff because they were so corrupt. They just paid it all off, right? Got a letter from the government saying that they paid it all off. Well, income navient, 2007. First thing they did is said that I owed them $60,000. I'm like, how do I owe you $60,000? They went all the way back to 1991 when I was at the first accredited workshop towards college credits or whatever, and they went back all the way back to that and said I owed all that money on top of the subsequent school in 2001 that I never really got anything from. Showed up a few times to the school, and by the fourth or fifth time I was going to show up to the school, or was told that I could come back to the school, that they were reopening. Boom, no school. Oh, nobody even heard of the school. Went, oh hell no, this isn't happening again. The job that I was working at the time, the company screwed me over, and when they merged back with the company that most of them had originally come from in the first place, then they merged back into PricewaterhouseCoopers. They turned around and screwed me over. I had got a contract from PricewaterhouseCoopers, including me and part of the assets they wanted to move over back into their company. Well, the guy that I was working under, the incompetent, very incompetent man that I was working under, and mind you, I was the only pale face in the group working technology. He turned around and whined and pleaded and pleaded and pleaded and pleaded because he had not received such a letter. And they told him he couldn't because, there was a gentleman I was working that was my immediate supervisor that I was working for, military guy, and that the position had to be held for him because he was on active duty in Afghanistan. And so what the guy did is got them to get rid of my letter to move over to PricewaterhouseCoopers. I went, wow. Oh, that's a slap in the face. Okay, brought me back into reality. And I couldn't believe all the stuff they cited as to why they didn't want me to go over to PricewaterhouseCoopers. I mean, it was just like this long list of stuff and stuff like that. And the gentleman that worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers that had come and talked to me, he said, "Oh, hi. You're that hot technician I've been talking to. Everybody's been talking about that's been keeping the company running and everything else, and made a lot of this product, stuff work, and the Atom program had come out, and I had shown all the nurse practitioners and stuff how to use that program. I'd gone through it." 48 hours, that totally gone through the program, knew how to break it, knew how to repair it, knew how to learn the lingo. Um, had gotten certified to be able to train how to use it properly and everything else, since we were working with hospices and everything else. They turned around and said I had not contributed anything of significance importance to the company, and that's why I wasn't being transferred over. The gentleman looked at them like they were crazy. He actually had my training manual in his hand on when new hires come in on how to use their laptops and everything, who to call, total protocol of the company, and the use of the equipment and how to maintain the equipment. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, didn't she write? Oh, yeah, yeah. That was a good thing." And the guy said, "But you just said that she didn't contribute anything." And I just looked at the gentleman and shook my head and said, "Hey, um, thank you for wanting me to come work for you." But I said they had told him that I didn't sign my sheet in the time of the transfer of personnel. And then he found out from me that I had, and he realized what the game was. And I just shook his hand and told him thank you very much and everything else. And later, the gentleman that had been in Afghanistan, that was my immediate supervisor, he called me a few weeks after I had got moved back to California. He called me and on my cell, and at the time I had a different cell, and he called me on my cell and he said, "Hey, I heard what happened," and he said to me, "Thank you, um, because they told me that they were going to give my position to you." And I said no. I said they told me that too, and I told him, I said, I can't take his position. Um, and after I said that, that's when I guess they decided to cut me from going, because they didn't want to take him because he was always gone on some training mission or something else. The gentleman that I worked for was very good at what he did, and he was very competent. The gentleman that was hired in above us was incompetent as hell. He was a Pete Hefsek type of guy. Excuse the expression, but he was a walking and talking clusterfuck. The other gentleman and myself were constantly having to put out fires that this guy was causing around the company because he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. He didn't know how to implement it. and we were constantly having to clean his behind. But guess who gets labeled under Donald Trump's world as DEI hires? Yeah, the black woman and the military guy. The military guy. Yeah, we get labeled DEI hires. Not the ex-Navy guy who just happened to be dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Yeah, found that out later. One of his ex-wives came by the company looking for him for non-payment of child support. Again, what are we talking about here? Moral character. So while people are throwing around all these race cards and everything else, and DEI this and DEI that, note, your lack of moral character shows greatly. So come midterms next year, if you rehire the same blockheads back into those positions which they are coveting now, all I can do is laugh and shake my head and say, yes, the world does see you, America, in your lack of moral character. On that note, good night. This has been Carrie V. Dean for A Dullard Speaks.